Well, this is the second and last war that we will discuss in detail, and it's kind of the war where it started for me. I wrote a book about this, the Syrian Civil War. The book is called The Promised Land, and it's in some libraries. It's about a Turkish girl who gets in love with a radical Islam boy, and they go to the caliphate of ISIS to fight for a borderless empire where the Islam legislation, the Sharia, applies. Well, and to discuss this Syrian Civil War, we have to go back to 18 December 2010, when that's when the Arabian Spring started, with street vendor Mohammed Bouazizi, setting himself on fire as a kind of a protest against how things were organized in the Middle East, the oppressive regimes. It resulted in more and bigger protests, even in kind of all over the Middle East. For example, in Egypt, where Ben Ali was removed from power. In Tunisia, that's where it started, where President Ben Ali was removed from power. Egypt, first Mubarak, then later Morsi. In Yemen, President Saleh was already removed. Now you have al-Hadi there. And in Libya, of course, you have heard this in the news, that Colonel Gaddafi was impeached. And well, you probably have seen some videos, or you've seen it on TV. Well, let's talk about the Syrian Civil War, because it was also the Arabian Spring was also in 2011 also coming to Syria, where President Bashar al-Assad was deemed just as dangerous and oppressive as all the other leaders in the Middle East. So for a long time, the Syrian citizens just underwent the regime until a group of young people with the age of 14 to 16, I believe, they went to the streets of the city of Daraa, and they wrote slogans on buildings against the regime of President Assad, writing things like "back off, doctor," because President Assad originally wanted to become a doctor, and well, his brother would become president, but he died somewhere in just before the death of his father. So President Bashar al-Assad became the president. Okay, these brave kids were arrested. They were tortured also. But the Syrian people went to the streets with olive branches as a sign of peaceful protest to demand their freedom, and they were freed. They were freed from prison, but they were tortured, and the protests only got bigger and bigger, and and the Syrian people were completely defenseless. But President Assad still commanded his army to shoot those people. He even used chemical attacks on his own people. And so the Syrian people had to fight back, because otherwise they would just be, well, slaughtered, I guess. It's so they had to fight back. They also picked up the weapons to do something about it. But this is where Jabhat al-Nusra and Islamic State come in, because the process radicalizes. It's more becoming, you know, the Sunnis versus the Shia Muslims, and you know, Islamic State came from Iraq over to Syria to start a caliphate, as you all know, which was declared by Caliph al-Baghdadi in 2014. Okay, and now here's the important part. The West didn't understand this conflict at all. They just were obsessed with removing President Assad from power, which seems logical, because he has done some terrible atrocities against his own people. But then there are three groups in the Syrian Civil War. One is President Assad and his army, and another is the terrorists, Islamic State, Jabhat al-Nusra, and so on. And then you have the Kurds. So the West wanted to impeach President Assad. Who did they support? The terrorists. The citizens started the war, but against President Assad, but the terrorists took over, and the citizens are now just at home, you know, hoping that the war will finally end. And yeah, it's true, the West supported terrorists so they could impeach President Assad. They were completely obsessed by that. Or Dutch government made a list of, because Europe and the Netherlands can't really think for themselves, they just do what America does. So the Netherlands made a list of requirements for groups they would support. And the result is that they supported Jabhat al-Shamia, which is, again, a terrorist group. And later they quit support. They stopped selling weapons to the group. And you know what the reason was? Not because they're a terrorist group, which would be logical, but the reason was that they were losing the war anyway, so, you know, we don't need them anymore. There's I want to discuss the kind of issue with the Kurds before we go to the break. And well, the Kurds are, for me, the group that the West should actually support, because, well, first of all, they have their legislation is more modern and liberal, let's say, than most of the Middle East countries. They have equal rights for women. They have a freedom of religion, and the death penalty and torturing are prohibited. And they were the major force against Islamic State, but they were completely ignored by everyone, actually. But they now have a region in northern Syria which is called Rojava, and well, in my opinion, President Assad should lose this territory for once and for all, so the Kurds can just live there and have their own state. And they should be protected. Well, the West should actually protect them from their enemy, which are, of course, the Turkish President Erdogan kind of states that he is against the PKK and the YPG, but he's actually just anti-Kurds, and he doesn't want a Kurdish state anywhere near the Turkish border. So that's what he's doing. He's invading some cities and extruding the Kurds there to just well. So after the break, we'll discuss more, the alliances in the world, in the Syrian Civil War, but also in the world. And well, one conclusion we can make here that, well, this is just Syria, but if you look at Libya or, well, pretty much everywhere, the Arabian Spring was kind of a disaster. If you look at the facts, I mean, it started as a revolt against oppressive regimes, which seemed to be a good thing, but it only caused chaos and anarchy, and it even was an opportunity for terrorism to thrive. So, well, I'd say we have a break for 5 to 10 minutes and then continue.